Welcome to the Brick by Bit podcast. Welcome again, everybody, to the Brick by Bit podcast. In this episode, we're taking a look at part 2 of our series on the mindset changes required for successful digital design and construction implementation. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, get in touch, and tell your colleagues and friends about the podcast. With that said, let's just jump right back into it. In part 1, we took a look at why the idea of culture change in our point of view doesn't work, and why that word culture is really a bit of an issue. And if we change that word from culture to mindset, we can be much more focused on identifying the changes that need to take place in order to make digital design and construction implementation more successful. And then the second part that we looked at in part 1 was how do we change the mindset associated with digital design and construction. What we want to look at here today is the focus on what needs to change, right? So we looked at the how. Now we want to take a look at the what. Okay, so look, when we're talking about what mindsets need, or aspects of our mindset that needs to change, from our point of view, we're looking at 3 key headline topics: approach to innovation, approach to collaboration, and integrity. Okay, and then we're going to go to those 3 topics in a little bit more detail. In terms of approach to innovation, we also need to kind of associate that with our approach towards risk. And if we're looking at being more and more innovative, we're looking at bringing in different processes and technologies. We have to change our risk profile if we have kind of a very, very risk averse approach to our business, or to, obviously to ourselves as well. You're going to be making an investment in technology. You're going to be making an investment into learning and your staff, and you're going to be making an investment into assessing and reworking and implementing processes with the focus of adding value, right? So there's time investment in that. There's going to be commercial investment in that. With that means that we've got to take an approach towards innovation that says I'm willing to take on more risk. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is on this particular item of innovation, and bring in the tools and the skill sets, and the ways of working that are needed for us to be successful with digital design and construction. With that said, right, we need to obviously always come with a plan, right, for how we're going to do this. But you have to accept the fact that the plan is not always going to go as you see it. People are at different rates. Technology requirements or project requirements may require a certain amount of functionality to be used, others not. In terms of your processes, you might have something that starts to work, but then you kind of find out as you're actually using it that there's actually maybe a little bit of waste that needs to be trimmed from it, or that it's not going in deep enough. In terms of, say, something like quality management. So it's not going to always work to plan. And that adaptation that we're looking for, is going to come through your tech and your learning, right? So if we have that bit of flexibility in there, we have to understand that it's not going to go to plan. We're going to be flexible on it, and where that's going to be driven from is the tools that are available to us, how we're using those tools, and our understanding of how to use those tools. And as that starts to change and evolve, so are our processes. So is the results that are going to be coming from this innovation investment. So we know something that kind of can be very, very challenging to someone or a company that's very risk averse. The second aspect of things, we're looking at collaboration. So now this one comes up all the time. Even when people are talking about kind of culture change, this is the one that comes up all the time. Says we have to be more collaborative. Well, what does that mean? From our point of view, what we're looking at is understanding that team and project success will equal my success. Okay, from a traditional mindset point of view, we a lot of times don't come to projects with that approach. We're coming to it kind of saying, I have a certain function within this project. I need to protect that function. I need to protect myself commercially from those things. And a lot of times we talked about flexibility from an innovation point of view. Collaboration certainly requires flexibility. Now, what do we see as the big issue that's preventing collaboration? Because everyone says collaboration. We've been hearing collaboration, digital design, construction, BIM, the whole thing over and over and over again. And if we look at how things are being implemented on projects in reality, okay, the true collaboration isn't happening all that often. It happens in pockets, and we definitely see it happening in pockets. And a lot of times that's just down to the individuals kind of coming together and again seeing the value between themselves and coming up with a solution for it. But kind of in our analysis and again preparation for this podcast, we're trying to distill that down is why are we not being collaborative? It's being taught in our education for systems and construction. It's something that's plastered all over any topic that relates to kind of BIM and digital design and construction. We hear the word collaboration. It's in contracts. It's in any of the kind of information requirements that are put on projects. How important collaboration is, and the main purpose of implementing digital design and construction on the project. But it's not happening on the ground. Why isn't it happening? And kind of the conclusion that we would have come up with for this. And I do think this is true. If we want to truly be collaborative, we have to understand that we are not that important to the project, right? And this is kind of a very difficult concept, I think, for a lot of people to grasp on. The people come to a project saying, I'm super important. If I'm not here or my company's not here, this project doesn't go ahead. That's not true, right? There's lots of architects out there. There's lots of engineers out there. There's lots of contractors out there. So in reality of the thing getting done, it is possible to get the thing done, without you. And that's kind of a bit more of an honest approach that's here. And really, I don't want that to sound kind of like a negative thing. Let's flip that around and be positive and kind of take it as it's a bit of respect for the other disciplines that are working on the project. You have to understand that you are a piece to this puzzle, right? And there's no one more important piece than the other. From an architect, a building needs to be designed, to be habitable and with a certain aesthetic, and a certain amount of functionality, circulation, all those things that architects look to in their design. It has to be functional from a mechanical and electrical point of view. So without a mechanical and electrical engineer and mechanical electrical contractors, the building doesn't work. Without a main contractor overseeing it or even kind of providing direct labor for it, if that's not there, it doesn't work, right? So we kind of understand we're a piece of the puzzle, and if we change our mindset to go from delivering information, delivering stuff for me and to do my package and get that out the door and forget about what everyone else needs, let's flip that around and say, you know what, I'm going to deliver for others. I'm going to deliver to meet my requirements, but I'm also going to deliver to support what is happening in the other disciplines on this project, right? And that's a big change in mindset that we talk about it being there. We put in our tender documentation that we're going to do it, but in practice, that's what's happening on our projects. And that's a big kind of change in mindset that we need to take a look at. So we want to deliver with others and we want to deliver for others, right? And that's the big difference there between collaborative being successful versus being unsuccessful and just being something that we talk about at the beginning of the project, we talk about at the end of the project, how great it was and how collaborative it was when everything's all over, when we forget about everything that happened during the project that wasn't terribly collaborative. That people say, no, I'm not producing this because it's not my time to produce this because I'm focusing on this. Without really understanding what are the information requirements for the life cycle of the project, not the life cycle, the construction stage of the project, design stage of the project that other people need to get their work, their thing finished. Which if everybody's working together, that means the project is getting delivered as opposed to just my package or my scope of work within this project. So if there's one thing to take away from that, is that I'm not that important. All joking aside, from this aspect of things, we have approached innovation, integrity, and collaboration. This aspect of collaboration to me is the most important part to take away from this podcast, is to really understand that we're a piece of the puzzle, and as a piece of the puzzle, it doesn't make it's the value is very limited until all pieces are there, all pieces are put in place, and if we need to support that, we need to support that, and that's the main goal for us from a collaborative point of view. And if we have a success overall for the project, that's actually going to equal success for me, right? Big change in mindset there. So integrity is the third aspect of the mindset that we see that needs to change. And what we're equating that to is add value, don't take value. So the first aspect that we want to talk about from an integrity point of view is that it's acceptable to get help. Okay? If we don't have a level of expertise, particularly from a digital design and construction perspective, is to go off and get that. Bring in that so that we don't end up with a situation where the poor advice or not fully thought out advice is being provided to clients or to supply chain members that doesn't actually look to add value to the project. We're seeing that a lot. Again, particularly from a digital design and construction point of view, where processes are being put in place and no one's really understanding implementation or the implications of those processes. Kind of say just an example of laser scanning. We're seeing kind of laser scanning as the overall process, not just dealing with acquiring the laser scans, but actually using those to check for as-built conditions. If people don't understand what that requires from the beginning, and that's being thrust upon people kind of mid-project, or actually not mid-project, towards the end of the project, there's a lot of effort associated with that may not be expected, right? Again, we're looking to, from one perspective, we kind of say, okay, we're trying to add value here because we're trying to get accurate representation of the as-built condition, which is fine and completely understandable. But on the flip side of that, again, if it's not an initial project requirement, people understood that they need to kind of follow this process. Now, all of a sudden, you're adding another layer of coordination, another layer of effectively a work, that is time consuming, that is taking away value from other members of the supply chain, right? So it's to really kind of understand that kind of when we don't fully understand what we're looking for, or don't have a lot of experience with it, that we kind of go out, ask for help, and get a bit of advice on kind of what's the best way to implement it. And it might be the case where kind of it's not appropriate given this specific project context. Acting in the interest of your client and the overall project team. Again, where we're seeing this from a digital design and construction point of view, a lot of times really is the information requirements and the interpretation of those of information requirements at handover stage. So it's making sure that if you're providing advice from a digital design and construction perspective, that it's something that, and particularly when we're writing requirements, is that it's a requirement that actually is a requirement for the client. That the implications and potential cost implications of that are fully understood by the client and the project team. The ancillary information that's associated requirement is provided. For example, when we see that there's these asset information requirements for a particular job, it's mentioned in an EIR, but they're actually not provided. So then we get to the end of the project where the actual maintainable assets haven't been identified, the actual information associated with those information assets hasn't been identified, and in the end, everyone's turning around looking at each other saying, well, what are we actually providing, right? So then someone from on the contract side of things is saying, well, because it wasn't defined, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm going to provide. And then someone from the client side, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, saying, well, what I meant was this. It wasn't put down there. So no one actually kind of understood that was the actual requirement. Nobody priced for that, and it's not going to be delivered, right? So it's making sure that kind of you're acting in the interest of your client, acting in the interest of the project team, and not just putting things in there to look like you're being comprehensive with your documentation, or just putting something in there that the client doesn't fully understand, or that the full set of backup information that's required to make that an effective requirement isn't actually there. The next one is kind of ties into that. But we're looking at kind of making sure that compensation is associated with value add. The one kind of big challenge we're seeing is when it comes to clients kind of requiring digital design and construction, they may not be kind of fully educated on the topic, and they're being slightly led astray in a couple of areas. Making sure that we're looking for compensation that's associated with actual added value, not just something that's different. Okay, so just the example that I want to use for this particular thing is we've seen kind of clients come up to us and say, I'm looking for drawings. and I'm saying that they need to be done using digital design, construction, BIM, Revit, whatever it is, and I'm being told that to get the same product, it's going to be an extra 25-30% of an uplift in cost just because we're using a different software application, right? That's a bit of nonsense, right? If we're looking for the same, so the added value there, the value there is the pack of drawings, right? And the same value is being added whether it's being done in AutoCAD or it's being done in Revit. If that's the case, then just because there's a different methodology, and quite frankly, a methodology that, if used properly, is actually going to be more productive for you and more efficient, then how is there an uplift in that if the same value add is going to be there, right? Now, on the flip side of that, if it's a case of, well, I've asked for this drawings and I've asked for this set of asset information that I never would have asked for previously, there's added value going on there. That's completely different, right? There's an extra value add that's associated there that then obviously extra value, added value deserves added compensation. That's not the issue. I think the issue is what we're seeing is clients not 100% understanding, being advised poorly in the beginning that says, well, you have to have this done in BIM because it's better. But you're looking for the exact same thing. Well, then kind of we need to take a look at really what's the value that's being added here, and how the compensation is being associated with that. Another side, kind of another thing is we shouldn't be looking for added compensation just because we're using a fancier word. Kind of where we're seeing this, and I think kind of again is down to kind of confusion and probably a misunderstanding of different things. This is just one example. Is say this idea of a digital twin, where previously we were providing models, and now we want a digital twin instead of an asset model in the end. Well, let's kind of cut through the nonsense here. A digital twin is a model, right? That's all that it is, right? And to say that it's something significantly different isn't true. To say that because you want a digital twin, it's going to cost X, Y, or Z more than it would be if we were just providing an asset model, not necessarily true. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to say I want a digital twin, but we still need to define what information is going on with a digital twin. If it's a case of all it is a snapshot in time that we have from construction over to handover, well then there isn't going to be much difference between providing the asset information that we've already asked for elsewhere in say the EIR than what the output's going to be, even though we want to go off and call it a digital twin. If it's off and being connected to sensor systems and everything else, well, that's a different story again. It's a different value add, and then all of a sudden we're talking about a different level of compensation. Most often than not, we're not talking about that, but most often what we're seeing is that just the term is being used to try and uplift cost and compensation, which again, from an integrity point of view, isn't terribly fair kind of on the client, particularly when it's based on their misunderstanding or lack of understanding of the particular topic. Another side, kind of a little bit more controversial, is kind of the use of models for punitive measures, kind of coming from the supply chain side. So using models to find gaps, and instead of raising those kind of say maybe at tender stage and kind of getting a fuller understanding and kind of looking to mitigate risk associated with the project, identifying the gaps, keep them to yourself. Once the contract starts, that's when the claims start. Right, so is that collaborative? Not really, right? Is there integrity issues associated with that? Look, I'd argue that there is, right? So, it's trying to kind of use the gaps there to price low, and then all of a sudden kind of increase the compensation associated with what those gaps are. So kind of I think that's kind of another thing where, from an integrity point of view, people really need to take a look at that. Is that where we want to be? Is the stress and everything else associated with that worth what it actually delivers for people? I'm not sure that it does, right? But look, on the flip side, there's a client side on that, and really is that well then, you know what, the requirements do need to be clear. Kind of on those from a couple of different perspectives. One, there shouldn't be gaps, right? That's and so if we're looking at things from an innovative and collaborative point of view, before we get to that stage, then there shouldn't be a huge amount of gaps, from that risk point of view. So and identifying what those requirements are clear. So it's kind of not putting in there, I want a digital twin, without defining really what you want, kind of for that. The second aspect of that, from the client side, when we're talking about compensation, is making sure accountability is appropriate. The gaps that are happening kind of at the design stage, that are then being kind of transferred over to the construction stage. So it's a risk transfer from design over to construction. And if the construction team is getting hammered by it, it's to make sure that the accountability for where that issue is lies in the right location. So in this particular example, if the error is design error and now it's being facilitated and corrected at the construction stage, well, then we do need to take a look at compensation for the contractors or subcontractors that are dealing with that issue, dealing with that gap, to be they're compensated for the work that's associated with that. If the issue arises, at subcontractor, responsibility level, then fine. But it's just to make sure that if issues are being resolved, that they're being compensated kind of at the right time. Which is a risk, kind of associated with any project. It's just to make sure that that's being looked at from a fair point of view. And probably the most important thing from the client side and related to compensation is making sure that the effort and compensation curves are aligned with each other. So what do I mean by that? If we're talking about taking the effort and pushing that forward in the project process, in the project life cycle, that the compensation for that also follows that. The kind of one big challenge that we're seeing from, say, a supply chain side is, if I put all this effort in the beginning, I'm not getting compensated for that. If the compensation curve doesn't follow that, I'm not getting compensation. So from a from a cash flow point of view, the value is being earned, but it's not being shared, right? So it's not being dished out. And then when we end up with a situation is that later on in the project, if the compensation curve is still kind of shifted more towards the middle or later end of the project stage, and what ends up happening a lot of the times is that effort that should be kind of pushed forward isn't being done. That's a very simple thing to say. Kind of understand kind of different project risks. Say, if we take just the planning process, if we put all this effort in now, that maybe we could be putting in kind of design development and construction stages. If we start to front load that, and we just hit a roadblock at planning stage, then we end up with with an issue that extra work has been done that has no possibility to be compensated for. I kind of we need to kind of understand and bring that risk into it. So I say it's not as simple, but from a general kind of point of view, the compensation curve needs to align with the timing curve. We started looking at modern methods of construction, all that. It's very much getting pushed forward toward closer to design than it is towards handover. Again, the compensation needs to follow that. Now, when do we do these things, right? And what I'll be saying through is that you come in and you're taking a look at kind of say innovation, collaboration, integrity. You're looking at all those things, and we're assessing that mindset for every stage of the project that we're involved with, right? So it's not a case of just kind of an overarching thing. It's to kind of say, okay, well, let's look at our approach to innovation and how we're going to look at it from how we're going to win work point of view. And we do the same thing, how we're going to do that from a procurement point of view or tendering point of view. This is how we're going to look at it from a design and information production point of view. This is how we're going to look at it from a site supervision point of view, right? So we're taking all those three topics, approach to innovation, approach to collaboration, and integrity, and we're saying, how are we going to change our mindset to effectively use the technology, the learning, the processes associated with digital design and construction at this particular stage? Right, and we're going to just repeat that process kind of over and over and over again for the different phases, and that's how we're going to come up with kind of a new mindset that is more productive. And in turn, the point of this is really to add value to ourselves as individuals and add value to ourselves as organizations, and then filter that back up at a macro scale, making the industry overall a better place to do work for ourselves. Now, just one last kind of point to kind of look at is just looking at some common pushback points that we see when people are trying to change their mindset. And I'm just going to go through a couple of these. One is that things are getting too complex, okay? And I think that's a combination of a genuine and there's some disingenuine items on that as well. The if we take, for example, kind of the implementation of ISO 19650, the dash 2, right? When we're kind of seeing kind of, if we're looking and following that word for word, right? We could very easily end up with processes, particularly from a quality control point of view, that are highly complex, that take up significant amounts of time. And then again, if we look at it from kind of a compensation point of view that we talked about, from before, if that's not being taken into account, when someone says we want to follow PES or ISO 19650, there's certain processes that now need to be implemented on that. Those have certain overhead associated with that. There's a certain amount of complexity that's there. That needs to be compensated. Okay, from an internal implementation point of view, it needs to be understood that we could get things a little bit too complex, and we need to start again going back to our approach to innovation. We may need to adapt from that. So there are some genuine cases that's there, but a lot of times the too complex sort of thing is really boils down to individuals not knowing what's involved and not wanting to take that personal risk, that personal journey into identifying what that is, to identify, to solve that issue. And this all kind of ties into, say, the next point where we kind of see, this is if we implement digital design and construction, it's going to negatively impact my design process. That's nonsense, right? Again, we're looking at mindsets. How does our mindset have to change from our design process point of view? But that's not to say that the decisions that we're making are any way hindered by using a different technology or a different mode for communication, right? It's just not the case, right? So again, that's tying back into the kind of when people say it's too complex or it negatively impacts my design process. It's something that's not understanding fully the capabilities of digital design and construction. It's not understanding or not having, say, the technical prowess to use the tools, and wanting to come up with some sort of excuse to avoid kind of changing their mindset for that. And that's what it's all, these kind of pushback points all are. They're things of why I don't want to change my mindset, right? That's what we're looking at. The other one is this benefits person or organization X, and it's not for me. Right, so this of the digital design construction, that's all for the client. We get no benefit as designers, right? Nonsense, right? It's for the contractors. It's for the construction stage. It's not for the design stage. Utter nonsense, right? All tying back to not putting in the effort to understanding what the tech, what the processes actually entail, and how it can actually enhance what they do. So it's knowledge and skill gaps generating a misunderstanding and fear. That comes together as pushback points for digital design and construction. Anything that comes up that is genuine, again, that ties back into our adaptability that we talked about from the innovation perspective. If we implement something, a certain amount of technology, certain processes, we see that it's actually not adding value or causing frustration, what we need to do is kind of assess those and say, okay, this was our plan, but it's not really going to plan. What we need to do is change this, or maybe even take something out, right? Just a kind of example for that, kind of we have kind of helped companies kind of get ISO 19650 compliant. And so one of the issues that kind of we would have put into some kind of process that we're developing is that feedback loop for, say, defects, right? So if we go through kind of a number of checks, if a defect is found at a number check, it's to record that defect, as well as go off and correct it, right? So then the idea is that after that, you have kind of your list of common defects. And then once we can assess that at the end of a project or at various stages during an audit and kind of say, okay, we're doing, this keeps happening over and over and over and over again. We need to go off and address that with a bit of training. So from that point of view, I think it's kind of a sound process to implement. But you also need to take into account what's going to happen from a reality point of view. How much time is that going to take? Who's going to be in charge of that, right? So a lot of times we've kind of seen that where we've tried to push that into, say, a non-conformance process, because a process that already existed within an organization of identifying non-conformances and then dealing with them. The reality of that was that one, the seriousness of calling something a nonconformance. Was misunderstood in that company for sure. The implication not only on say 19650 but on ISO 9001 with their quality management system was significant. The admin associated with the recording, maintenance, analysis, and all that kind of wasn't fully understood. Or fully considered kind of when that requirements point of view. So kind of when we sat down and I looked at it, the next time around when we came around and said, okay, this isn't being done. Okay, why is it not being done? Well, because there's a huge body of work there, and then the terminology isn't right, because the terminology is significant for us. So it was something to say, okay, well, we just need to pull that bit out and maybe just record it in another way that ties into kind of the project reports. So we're not going to call it a nonconformance. It's just tied into the general coordination reports. And then at various stages we can audit those and then just have a look at those. So it became something that was much more workable, much more labor intensive, and works. So that was just kind of example where where things can maybe get too complex, and it's a genuine case. We do need to adapt to adapt for that. So I think that's it for part 2. The next part that we're going to take a look at from this point of view of changing the mindset is a few traps that I think have been set from a digital design and construction point of view. We kind of touched on one of them today about kind of say the terminology that's being set up and kind of the understanding of what's involved in that terminology, what it really means, and identifying kind of what the real implications of those things are. I mean, that's just one example of one of the things that we'll talk about for in part 3. So like always, kind of get in touch, subscribe, contact us, contact@brickbybitpodcast.com. We're on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. So please get in touch, check us out, and we'll talk to you again soon.